It's been a long week, right? Are you ready to wind down? Why not? It's time for the Wine Time Fridays podcast with Shelley and Phil. Neither are sommeliers, but both have a deep passion for life, each other, and of course, delicious wine. And now, here to talk about this week over a glass of wine is Shelley and Phil. It's wine time!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil on this Friday, January 26th, episode 197. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy
The
Friday.
drama. It's wine time. This may surprise you, but we have another guest this week. 3 weeks in 2024 and 3 guests. This is our fourth guest, because I forget the dates sometimes. We have with us Andrew Gerow with Tirriddis. Is it Tirriddis Winery, Tirriddis Wines, Tirriddis
Just
Sparklers,
Tirriddis.
Sparkling
Just
Tirriddis?
Just Tirriddis, but if you want to call us Tirriddis Sparkling Wines, that's A-OK.
A-OK. We have 3 wines that we're going to be tasting through today, I believe. Is that correct?
No, there's more.
We are tasting through all of them. Okay.
All of them.
I'm just really confused. We have a plethora of wines, 2, 4, 6, 8. Remember last week with John and Edward, Fast Eddie Holmes, we had 8 that we tried as well. So we will be taking an Uber into Coeur d'Alene. No, just joking. What I'd like to do is, as you open that first one that we're going to try, explain to, it's probably asking him to do a lot. There's so much to go over, like how you came up with your name for one thing. I know how it is, but I love it.
Mhm.
So you want to explain that? But we have a lot of wines to taste through, so that's why I want
Absolutely. I'd love to just start off so
Yeah.
everybody knows the context of Tirriddis. I mean, it's a little bit complicated, but there's a rhyme and a reason for it.
There is.
The name Tirriddis comes from tirage, riddle, and disgorge. It's the 3 steps for the traditional method sparkling process.
Yeah.
We ended up going up with Tirriddis because, every name you ever think of in the wine industry, it's already taken. So when you
Most
find
that's
something,
right.
you got to run with it.
Sure.
And I ended up starting Tirriddis with 2 of my best friends. So there's
cool.
3 of us. We're not going to fight over whose name goes on the label.
Outstanding.
And none of us have good winemaker names. So, but also we wanted to really showcase our passion and devotion to sparkling wines. And all we do is traditional method sparkling wines in Washington State, or method champenois, whatever terms you use.
Sure.
And so we wanted to showcase it. And when you're doing sparkling, it's one of the most technical and complicated types of wines to make in the world. So really just showcase that's what we're doing. So
I love it.
Tirriddis coming from tirage, riddle, and disgorge, the 3 steps to showcase our devotion to sparkling in Washington State, and not creating champagne style wines in Washington State,
Because
but
we live in Washington State.
exactly,
Yeah.
because we live in Washington State, but creating sparkling wines that are very representative of Washington. So,
Love it.
might make a French person roll in their grave, but, that doesn't matter to us. What
They're-
we're trying to do is...
Let's be honest, they're already dead.
Oh.
So if they're going to roll in the grave, I'm sorry,
Exactly.
you're no longer a part of our life.
That's true.
Well, I mean, historically maybe, but you have no say. Go ahead and roll.
Yeah.
Shelley's rolling her eyes as they're rolling in their graves. I love the name. Let's open that
That's
first
great,
one.
yeah.
Yep. So
yeah.
the first one that we'll be trying, so the first 3 actually are going to be 3 different stages of the sparkling process. So the first wine that we'll be trying is a base wine. So this is a still wine and the precursor to a sparkling.
Beautiful.
The second wine that we'll be trying is a wine in tirage, which is the first step of the sparkling process. And then the third wine is going to be that finished wine. So after the
Okay.
tirage, the riddle, and disgorge. And then after that, we'll just taste through a lineup of our wines that
Beautiful.
really represents Washington. And
I
us as a
love
producer.
this. I have never done this before like this. This is fantastic. So will we pour the 3 in the glasses at the same time and
Yep.
taste? Beautiful.
Absolutely. So I'll grab those 3 first. And
So-
then, so I know I explained tirage, riddle, and disgorge
Yeah.
comes from the 3-step process, but that's 3 steps. What does it mean? I'll pass this
thank
to
you,
you
thank you.
first. So the 3-step process, starting with tirage. The tirage step is when you take a base wine that Phil is pouring. It's similar to any still wine to keep it simple. But what you do to that is you add yeast and sugar. and then you put it into the bottle. In the bottle, that yeast eats the sugar and produces CO2 and a little bit more alcohol. So effectively, you have a sparkling wine at that point, but there's all this yeast and sediment in it, and that does two things really to the sparkling wine. It acts as a sponge and absorbs a lot of those aromatic and flavor compounds, so it mutes the wine. But it also acts like little mini Mentos that you put into Coke. So it fizzes out and you lose the carbonation. And, unfortunately, sparkling wine without carbonation is not sparkling wine. So it's really important to get that out of there. And that's where the riddling and disgorging comes into play. The riddling is pretty much the settling process, where you settle all that yeast and sediment into the neck of the bottle, and it condenses in a little puck. Yeah. And then once it's all condensed into a little puck in the neck of the bottle, you disgorge it. And the disgorging step is you freeze the neck of that bottle, and then you open it up, and it shoots out that frozen plug of yeast, and you're left with a crisp, clean, sparkling wine.
Do you do any replacing at all of that a plug?
No, not of the plug itself, but you do lose a little bit of wine in that process. So you top it up, and you can do what's called a dosage, which is a little added sweetness back to it if that fits your wine style. Yeah. If not, you just throw a cork in it, keep it Brut Zero, and you're golden. And this is a wine entourage. So this is a little important thing right here.
Love it.
All the yeast and sediment is on the bottom right there. So you want to take that. It's
we can notice that. I don't think we can.
Yeah, I don't.
So
trust
quick
us,
question.
it's hazy.
Wait, don't pour it. I'm gonna take a picture.
This still wine, do you actually sell that as a still wine?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Got it.
So when you do this secondary fermentation in bottle, it's very important that the environment you're putting into the bottle is great for yeast. Because, the yeast is what's going to bring it through that secondary fermentation and give it that carbonation. So if the yeast isn't happy, it's going to give off flavors, or it's not going to produce the carbonation that you want. So it's really important that base wine is a good environment for the yeast. And yeast doesn't like alcohol. Alcohol kills yeast. So it's really important that yeast or that base wine is lower alcohol. And to do that, you need to get into a cooler climate that slows the ripening, or you harvest a little bit earlier, or you crop a little bit higher to slow the progression and the aging or maturity of the grapes. So the base wine, it's going to be much higher acid, lower alcohol, and it's not going to be very aromatic at all.
But it does have a little bit of a nose.
But it does have a little bit of a nose.
Yeah.
And
interesting.
The base wine, the reason that it's not very aromatic is because all those volatile compounds that give it the aroma are still in the wine attached to sugars. So when it goes through that secondary fermentation, the yeast eats those sugars and releases those volatiles. So it's expressive as a sparkling wine, not as a base wine. If it's expressive as a base wine, you already lost all those compounds. So it's not going to be aromatic as a finished wine. So it's just, one of those complicated things that sparkling wine needs.
So that's number 2. This is I'm not even going to try to replicate what you said. Before we toast this, I have to ask a couple quick questions. One, how long has Tirriddis been making wine? How long have you guys been doing this?
So we started our first official vintage in 2020.
Nice year to do that.
Nice year to do it. It just kind of goes to our
couldn't sell it anyway.
Exactly. But sparkling wine is a labor of love and requires a lot of time. Yeah. So it was the perfect time. And in 2020, when we started it, we actually were still going to school. So we knew we were graduating in late 2020 in December or spring of 2021. But the big global pandemic came around. You may have heard of it. May have affected your life a little bit, but it affected ours, and we're sitting around. I was sitting with 2 of my best friends, and we're doing what we normally did in college. We worked a lot, but we would always be sure to celebrate with fried chicken and champagne. So we had a couple bottles of champagne and a little bit of fried chicken, and joked around a little too much, and we decided the best thing for us would be to start a sparkling winery. And
There probably was a napkin and a pen, and you had your business model laid
And some
out,
fried chicken.
all down there,
exactly,
with grease all over,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
Well, so this is a little bit of a predicament because I feel like we need to toast with that one, but we do need. Yes, look at this is beautiful. This is a beautiful sparkler.
Let's toast with it so you see what sparkling is.
So to health, wealth, and abundance, and gratitude, and romance, and
Peace on earth.
that's right.
Exactly.
Hashtag.
Cheers. We have a hashtag yum that we put on every single post, so you just got to say yum.
Yum. Okay. We will put that on.
Man, that explodes in my mouth. Is it yum with
The difference in the clarity.
Yeah,
exactly.
So this second one is not filtered at all yet, or
it has not been riddled or disgorged yet.
Gotcha.
So
none of that is bad for you by any stretch. Yum with 1 M or 2 M's?
3 M's.
Because there are 3 of you.
Yep.
Right. Perfect.
Everything goes in 3s for us.
Yeah, I like that. So you can't own a hashtag, but you can certainly use the crap out of it to where if anyone else uses it, they're just directing them to you.
Exactly.
Pretty much. So, that's our free social media advice to you today.
Sounds great.
Because that's what we do for a living. Let's go ahead and taste through these. This is fantastic. I am so stoked. Yeah. All right. Tell us on this still wine.
Like I mentioned, the base wine.
Yeah.
It's going to be much higher acid, very low alcohol compared to any other still wine that you have. So think about it. It tastes good for a glass, but it's going to rip your tonsils out, burn your enamel off, and give you heartburn that night. No. That's for sure. But that's very important for sparkling wine because that low alcohol makes a conducive environment for the yeast, and the high acid stands up to the carbonation in the finished product. So it's a very balanced product. So that's very important. And it's going to be muted because, like I was saying earlier, it's important to keep those compounds very tight in the solution so they're expressed in the sparkling wine, not in the base wine. So when you try it, you're pretty much going to think about biting a lemon and licking some dirt. That's pretty much the characteristics that you get out of this.
Boy, I'm getting the lemon. Yeah. I'm getting that.
That's acid. So do you use, you probably don't, do you use the same grape varietal?
So we use a bunch of different grapes. Going back to what I was saying of Tirriddis, we're not trying to make champagne style sparkling in Washington. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves to those old world ideas.
You don't have to.
We don't have to. We're young. We're stupid. We take the hardest route possible. So we foresee this potential of creating a typical sparkling wine for Washington. Washington is much warmer than Champagne. That being said, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, they do have their very niche regions in Washington, but as a whole, they don't really grow that great. Chardonnay, on the other hand, it grows great in Washington. Yeah. So these three are actually all Chardonnay.
100% Chard.
100% Chard.
Beautiful.
But these other wines that you'll be trying very specific to Washington.
So these three, this is a perfect reflection of this process.
Yep.
Because it is, I'd say apples to apples, but it's grape to grape.
Yep.
Really, along the process. Okay, Shelley, did you have this?
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting, and the lemon for sure. Okay.
And when we were first starting, we were getting real gung ho and ambitious and stoked. And after our first vintage, we would take this base wine, add some Sprite or 7-Up to it, have it as a little spritzer. It gets the job done.
We would never say this publicly, but there are times in the summer when we're trying to cut back on our sugars with wines that some of us at this table might put a little LaCroix in with a Chardonnay. I'm not going to mention any names.
Exactly.
Oh, I already know it's in. You don't have to tell me. You know it's in.
Yeah, what do you think about a base wine? Have you ever had a base wine before?
Nope.
Not as a base.
People will always say, "Oh man, it must be so fun. You get to just taste wines and like blend wines with your best friends." And it's like, yeah, being with my best friends is one of the coolest things while running a business. But at the same time, tasting base wine is probably the least fun type of wine that you can be tasting. Give yourself a couple hours of tasting it. you can't feel your tongue.
Yeah.
Your enamel is burnt off. You know, it's pretty intense.
Using the verbiage from Gary Vaynerchuk, it just rips your tongue up, right?
Yep.
You're right, I think, on one glass.
Right.
No problem. What were you going to say?
Do you bottle your base wines so that you can show your tasting people who come in? Or
Nope.
do you bottle them and then rebottle them later?
Nope. We just bottled this because you're coming up.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So generally we don't show this. Well, sometimes Prosser, a little plug to Prosser, Washington. We have like these barrel events. So Spring Barrel is that fun event that we have in Prosser. And a lot of sparkling wine is not made in barrel. You know, like red wine is predominantly the wine that you taste out of the barrel. But sparkling, on the other hand, you don't really see it. Yeah, it's made in the bottle. But we will show our base wines in Spring Barrel just because one of the most important things for us is educating the consumer, increasing the transparency between producer and consumer.
That's what we want to do also.
Yeah, exactly. And if you know, there's no problem with $6 to $8 bottles of wine. You know, it increases accessibility. But if you're spending more than that, you know, you should really know what goes into the product, and hence the name Tirriddis and the experience that you get when you come into our tasting room. It's very educational.
With Tirriddis, you are learning about sparkling wine
just by saying
it, which is fantastic.
Exactly.
Andrew has been nice enough to bring some potato chips, which, as you know, 3 weeks ago, when we had Sam Lang on with Mark and Sarah Lathrop, I have to say it, from Liberty Lake Wine Cellars, give them a shout out.
And Sam's from Lola.
And Sam's from Lola, also from Beverly's, back in the day. But we had French fries. Well, this is kind of like a French fry. It's a potato chip, you know, and so that's going to pair well with this as well. This is a little crunchier than a French fry, so.
Exactly, but it has the fat, it has the salt, and that's what really goes well with a high acid sparkling wine. You know, very crisp. And going back to, as I mentioned, we joked a little too much while eating fried chicken and drinking champagne. It's that not only is it that like a chemical combination of that fat and salt combined with that high acid and alcohol of the sparkling wine, but it's also that juxtaposition of classy and trashy. You know,
but you're so right about that.
Luxury.
Nobody would ever say, "What are you talking about? Champagne and French fries?" We had it was a Dutz, as our champagne. We had a couple other French sparklers that were just outside of champagne with the French fries. But in essence, you're right. Who would have a champagne with a potato chip or fried chicken or French fries?
Exactly. And you know, if
it's a perfect pairing.
Give us 20 years, hopefully, in our tasting room as we expand and mature and really grow. Maybe we'll have fried chicken in our tasting room. But unfortunately, it's kind of expensive and kind of a nightmare to get that licensing. So we're okay with serving potato chips. It gets the message across, and we can tell the story at the same time.
Sure.
This is
really interesting.
Such a treat.
It gets sort of like pink
in the second one.
Yeah.
So the second one, the bottle and tirage, I mean, obviously, just by looking at it, it's hazy, right? Yeah. And as I mentioned, that clouds the aromatics, and it will make the carbonation go very quickly. And especially since your glass is empty, if you want to give that a little swirl and really bring up.
This?
Yep. And then it will really bring the sediment into the solution.
Oh, and then pour?
And then you pour it. So now it's particularly hazy now.
And it almost looks like a Hefeweizen. A very light Hefeweizen. You're waiting for the bubbles to go away, but they made.
It's not going to go away because that all those little yeast cells, they act as little mini Mentos that the CO2 nucleates out on. And so it will go flat quickly, but it's really important because those yeast cells, they preserve the wine. So it acts as, it does a lot of great things. So it preserves the wine in the bottle, but it also acts as a good flavor integration because that brioche character that everybody knows and loves about traditional method sparkling wine, that a majority of that comes from the wine picking apart those dead yeast cells in the bottle. So after it finishes that fermentation, which only takes about 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on the temperature, after that, the yeast cells die, and then the wine just picks apart those yeast cells and integrates all that flavor. And then, depending on how long you leave it on those dead yeast cells, it will either be more fruit forward for less amount of time or much more savory and baked good-esque if you leave it on for much
Baked
longer.
good-esque. I like it.
So do you experiment with how long you leave it on?
Yes. We very well, I say yes, but we started in 2020. So we kind of have a limited time frame for the amount that we can experiment. But we do have wines in bottle. Like last year, we bottled our first project that we really anticipate to keep in bottle for about 5 years.
Oh, good. Okay.
But sparkling wine, it just takes time. It's a very architectural form of winemaking.
Champagne, most of the champagnes that come out are non-vintage.
Mm-hmm.
The vintage ones are the best of the best vintages. Are you going to be non-vintage on this, or will you be vintage?
So this is a fun little topic of conversation.
Should that be our tease?
Adding to the complications of this conversation between non-vintage and vintage, there's also this term in sparkling wine called multi-vintage. And so to keep things as simple as possible, non-vintage and multi-vintage wines are blends of wines from multiple vintages.
Yes.
But non-vintage blending is done to achieve a certain style and characteristic, where multi-vintage, you're blending those different vintages, but you're trying to showcase the true character of that time frame. Mm-hmm. So you are getting disparities and certain qualities that you wouldn't get in non-vintage. And then there's vintage, which is the purest expression of a certain time and place, right? So we actually use all three, non-vintage, multi-vintage, and vintage in our program. So yeah, just
and it's so
depends.
young. Your program is so young. So.
Yeah, and when we started,
data points are not many to draw from.
We like to consider ourselves very proactive versus reactive winemakers. Yeah, so everything that we're employing now, even though it might not look that way on paper, it's all done for the future. Because when we first started in 2020, we have to make a non-vintage wine that's vintage, but we labeled it non-vintage because it's like 2 years from now, we don't want to scare someone like, why is this non-vintage now? Like, why is it, so it's just being proactive so we don't have to face those things. And one of the biggest goals for us is being a legacy producer. Like, we're working hard just so like our kids, have the winery to
How old are you again?
Really continue. 24.
24, married?
Nope.
Kids? No.
Nope.
And yet you have got this thought in your mind. This is really remarkable. So the second pour is the tier in Tirriddis.
Exactly.
We're going to take a break because we need to empty glasses to get ready to move on to the other 5. And when we come back, we're going to start actually talking a little bit about glasses and why we have this is typical Chardonnay glass, yes?
It's a typical sparkling wine glass, actually.
Nice. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil and Andrew Gerow from Tirriddis here in Prosser, Washington. Man, that first segment was so cool. The second, we're just gonna line these up.
We're just gonna start throwing
bottles out. When we went to break, I mentioned the glasses. Okay. The reason I mentioned the glasses are a couple of things. Back in the day, Andrew, I don't know if you know this, but back in the day, so the flutes.
Mm-hmm. Champagne glasses have gone through an evolution.
Yes, they
Absolutely.
have. Okay. Yes. And I felt the need. Shelley, you have your notes in front of you this time. Can you talk about the CDA Gourmet Wine Word of the Week? Because I need to get Andrew's opinion on this. Okay. Did you take a look at the Wine Word of the Week?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm familiar.
Okay.
So the Wine Word of the Week is Coupe Glasses. A coupe glass, also known as a champagne coupe or a saucer glass, is a stemmed glass with a wide, shallow bowl and a flat base. It's typically used for serving champagne and sparkling wines. It was typically used to. And generally, the coupe glasses are etched, right?
Exactly.
And then there's also the Marie Antoinette
style.
but it's a little different.
So I brought these glasses specifically for today, knowing you were going to have a base wine for us to taste and go out of your way for that. I wanted to go out. So I went back and I looked and I found a glass from 1916.
Wow.
And the only reason I know is because it's been sitting in our china cabinet because it's my great-grandparents' wedding.
Wow.
From their wedding, yes. If you can see that, there is etching. It is a big bowl. It's flat. And
however, you lose all the bubbles very quickly.
You would, especially, this is yours. You would lose them very quick. I was hoping that I could pour a little in this for you and Shelley as well, just for you. Well, I guess Shelley and I would share, just to get some contrast.
Yeah,
would be kind of fun. But you said these are actually Riedel sparkling glasses. They are very similar to, although a little bit sharper taper, but to like a Chardonnay glass. No more flutes. Can we just stop at the flutes?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. This is a lot of fun. But I wanted to bring something on episode 1 of Wine Time Fridays way back in 2020. We opened up with a Barefoot Bubbly and an actual champagne. And we had them in these glasses. Wow. That was the first and last time these glasses have been on this podcast. And now we're breaking them out. You have to stop saying breaking them out. We're bringing them out again. No, I don't want to break these glasses. These are pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand one to you and entrust you not. You can bring it out too. Just don't break it out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about maybe we can on that rosé.
Yeah.
Sparkler contrast it in these glasses as well. Would
Absolutely.
that be good? So tell us a little bit about that.
What is your opinion about the various glasses? You don't like flutes.
So I think it's, the thing about wine is so subjective, right? So really it's just important to understand what's happening. Where, coupes, they're great. They serve a certain purpose. Flutes, they're also great. They serve a certain purpose as well.
We don't know what
but there's a reason why we do what we do by serving in this glass that people think is a white wine glass. So I guess starting with the function of the coupe and the flute, right? So a coupe is
much harder to hold.
Much harder to hold, a little bit off balance. But a coupe, what it's supposed to do is give aromatics. So it has that very wide surface area to interact with the air to give some great aromatics, which is great. I love expression from a wine. But the problem is, this is for sparkling wine. And the coupe, it releases CO2 very quickly. So you're going to lose the carbonation of a sparkling much quicker from a coupe than a flute. So, it has great expression, but you lose bubbles way quicker.
But you can stick your nose in this glass after you swirl, and you're going to get plenty. Right?
Exactly.
You're not doing it you're not swirling with that.
But then on the other hand, so you have the coupe on the aromatic and losing bubbles quickly into the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the flute. Whereas a flute, it really maintains bubbles very great. But there's no way you're sticking your nose in a flute. It just doesn't work.
Get it out.
So you're never going to get it out. So with flutes, you have almost zero aromatic expression of the wine, but it really maintains its bubbles. So, those are the two ends of the spectrum for those glasses, where the glasses that we use lands kind of right in the middle.
Yeah.
They're tapered and
glass.
Very bulbous in a very particular way. Thank you to the Riddell family.
Sure.
They do great work with wine and proper expression of said wines. But these, it maintains the bubbles, and it also gives the opportunity for very good aromatic expression of the wine.
Taste those between the two. I got a difference.
Really?
Yep. In our house, we use the Andrew Robinson, the one wine glasses, the one red and the one white. And we use the one whites for all of our sparklers as well.
That is the way that I do it as well. If you get only wine glass,
Well, just on the design these to cover this. And by most people, I mean like 98% of the people drinking wine couldn't distinguish between a Chardonnay in a normal everyday wine glass you get from the dollar store, okay, with no cut edge and no nothing good, versus one that's in an actual Riedel Chardonnay glass. You wouldn't tell the difference.
Right.
The vast majority. Okay. So she designed this glass that would be take all the reds and take all the whites, including sparklers, and they're fantastic. And
Yeah, they're very fun.
we just need to keep two.
Yeah.
I mean, we have multiple of both for when we have guests, but yes.
Yeah. So
what is your first opinion on this?
I think it's very fun. With sparkling, the coupe, as I mentioned, it releases the carbonation quicker. So maybe it's more of a tale of times, right?
Yeah.
Right now, I would be confident in saying that you get a real great nose out of the coupe.
Yeah.
But it is a tiny bit flatter, whereas the wine in the glass, I'm also getting different characteristics out of the two of them. So the one out of the true sparkling glass, I'm getting more of that savory brioche characteristic from the autolytic process of the sparkling, whereas out of the coupe, it's a little bit more fruit forward and a little bit more mineral.
That's why I said there is a difference between the two, and honestly, I don't think one's better than the other. They're just different.
Right.
But you're going to lose that out of the coupe pretty quick.
Absolutely.
You're going to need to drink that pretty quick.
Right.
Like when I poured the wine in, it's like, man, it fills up fast.
Yeah.
It's like right at the top, but we're not swirling, so it's okay.
Yep.
I'm handing that over to you.
Okay. And you don't trust yourself?
No.
Do you know how a coupe was made?
No.
Or what it was designed after?
No. Oh, yes, we do know that. The Marie Antoinette.
Yep.
Okay.
But please tell it, because actually, we did a little. My Uncle Joe, who I started texting, like, I need to know when they were married, when Grandma and Grandpa Erica were married. When did they toast these with these glasses? I actually have a picture of them. I'll put it on Facebook. It'll be good. Posterity. Thank you. What is it?
Not prosperity.
What is it?
Posterity.
Yeah. Okay. And he said, if you look in the back cabinet, these glasses are there, which is kind of cool. That was from 1966 when they had their 50th wedding anniversary. That's how we knew it was 1916 that these glasses came out. But do tell how these came to be and why the etching. I mean, the etching is a big deal.
I don't exactly know the etching part of it. Besides, straight from the beginning, coupes are modeled after Marie Antoinette's breast. So
that's right.
that is how they were designed and formed.
This is a family podcast, Andrew. No.
Well, 21 and up apparently with wine. So yeah, apparently they're modeled after Marie Antoinette's breast. So maybe not originally designed for pure function, but it's one of those things that you produce and then you look at and you're like, oh, this is great for sparkling.
And by the way,
it's a nice legacy.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Generations have these little just markers, I guess, and that is a marker, which good or bad, right or wrong, it is what it is, and it's like you said, it's a great thing to have that marks that generation,
right?
And we have this sitting on this table. By the way, can I just digress real quick? 2 weeks in a row, first for Wine Time Fridays. Last week we did an episode on a pool table, essentially. I mean, it was a covered pool table. Today we're on a riddling rack. I don't think you can see them. I'll take pictures. I have taken pictures, but they have these high-tech riddling racks here, not like what we have at the house.
Yeah. So, like riddling, it's very important. Because, like we were saying, when we did that first range of wines, from the base wine to the Tirriddis wine to the finished wine, the wine is very clean. And to get the wine very clean, you have a very, very good program, a very, very good discouragement program. Riddling, like I said, is the settling process. Originally, it's done on riddling racks, which are wooden A-frames that kind of have notches in them, so there's 3 positions, and you hand riddle twisting.
There is
by
3
hand.
Positions on the angle, right?
Yep. So
does that happen on this too?
So this cage, this is the future of sparkling wine for sure. it's much easier. You
Sure.
don't have to get carpal tunnel.
No.
You can program it exactly how you want with an Excel file. And pretty much what you do is you
Bluetooth?
forklift it into a little claw-looking thing. So it's this little claw that wraps around a cage.
Oh, that makes
So this is a
perfect
riddling
sense.
cage. And then what that claw does is it rotates 360 degrees. It also has a little vibrator cuff on it, and it tips
So all
up
the
and down.
sediment goes
So
to-
you
Oh,
can program it to turn when you want it on whatever interval you want it. You can have it vibrate whenever you want. And it goes from flat with the ground to 90 degrees with the neck tipping down. So you program it
It
however
seems
you
like a
want to
faster
get from
process
there.
too.
Yep, it can be faster.
Okay.
But faster is not always better.
I
And
get
you know, with wine, great things take time.
But like with a riddling rack, you had a mark on the bottom of the bottle, so that you could see, because you wanted all those. Once
Right.
you turn it, you may not remember, so those marks
Mhm.
have a
Mhm.
purpose, right?
Exactly.
You don't need that here,
Exactly.
and it makes
So-
sense to have the one machine and all these racks, and you just put it in.
Yep.
The machine is the big cost, I would imagine. Yeah.
It's relatively cheap for all things
Really?
considered.
Wow.
Yep. It costs about the same, if not less, than a high quality tank.
Wow.
So do these get riddled every day?
No,
You have
so you only riddle once.
Oh,
Yep. So the
in
thing
this
is,
system, because before,
all sparkling wine, you only riddle it once.
well, I guess
Because
when you
think about it, when you have a bottle, when you riddle it, it starts horizontal and then you bring it vertical with the neck down. So all that yeast, when it's horizontal, is going to be spread out all across the bottom. And that's great surface area for that flavor extraction, that brioche character.
Oh.
And you have very efficient fermentation. Whereas when you go vertical, if it's still undergoing the fermentation,
Right.
the yeast is going to start competing with each other because it's all caked up and like pent up, and it'll start releasing some reductive character and off flavors, which you
okay.
don't want.
No.
And you're only having that much surface area to extract that
Got
flavor
it.
from. So when you're going through the tirage step, it's important to keep them side by side like this. But when you pretty much riddle right before you want to disgorge it, just to get as much flavor extraction as possible. So right before you're about to disgorge it, you riddle it, bring it from here. Takes anywhere from 7 days to 14 days, pretty much, depending on your program, depending. And at the end of that, these cages, they're not going to be like this. They're going to be rotated fully. So there's 2 forklift positions on them. And once it's done riddling, you just forklift it out, put it
And
on the
here's your
ground,
forklift.
and it's totally riddled. And then say,
You do your
once you
disgorge.
finished all your other riddling of that batch, so say you need to do 10 cages, you do 10 cages. Once all 10 of them are done, then you do the disgorging process of all 10.
Which, of course, the timing and the rhythm of that is fantastic, because you're not having to just jump back and forth and everything.
Exactly.
But when you're doing the hand riddling, it's stretching that. So when you say you only riddle once, it's basically one complete
7-day
turn.
process.
Yeah, but what they used to do is go a quarter turn every 4 to 6 or 7 days and just keep moving the bottle up.
Every day.
Yeah, and then
So-
all of a sudden you got that full rotation, and then it's done.
So pretty much keeping it simple, you go from horizontal to vertical with the neck facing down, right? But that's going to happen on a riddling rack and a riddling cage. With the hand riddling, you're doing twice a day, pretty much. You're going through, giving it a little corner turn. Every 4 or 5 days, you give it a notch up. It just depends. And, if you have 100,000 bottles and only one person doing it, that's going to be what's limiting how quickly it's done.
Have you seen videos of people doing that?
Yep.
We just saw a show recently, and it was really good. But these guys, white gloves, he's so fast.
And we started 100% hand riddle. So
Really?
Yep. We started with 1 riddling rack, 6 5-gallon buckets, and some old apple bins. That's all the equipment that we had when starting our sparkling winery. With that,
digging this.
we would, we'd have that cage, that riddling rack, and riddle down those bottles, and then put dry ice and water in those 5-gallon buckets. You can fit 6 of these bottles
In a
neck
5-gallon
down in a 5-gallon bucket. It would freeze the necks, and then we'd hand disgorge them and put a crown cap on.
With gloves on.
No.
Really?
Yeah, you can't have a glove because when you disgorge it and open up that, it's going to have that pressure in the bottle. So what you want to do to keep the bubbles from flowing out, you put your thumb over it. And with the glove, you don't have that tight seal. So you need to put your thumb over it and get frostbite.
Yeah.
And then, but we used a crown cap when we started, actually.
Oh, that's
because
smart.
the machine for a crown capper is about $500, whereas a machine for a corking unit is about $500,000.
Wow.
So there's kind of a drastic difference in that.
A little bit.
We always say it takes two things to start a winery, and that's time and money, but we're broken and patient. So we have to figure out what we can do on our own hands and just really bootstrap and grind ourselves into the dirt. And so started with the riddling rack. We'd riddle down all those bottles, disgorge them. We'd get about 12 cases of wine from each. And then we'd put them in the back of our car, go to the local restaurants, try to sell them. Then we'd get enough money to get another riddling rack, so and so on. We ended up with 22 riddling racks. And then we started investing in these cages. Because one of the things that's important for us is, we're young. We're too young for an unsustainable program. And unfortunately, people kind of limit sustainability to the environment, which, environmental sustainability is very important, but it also goes to the community and the people that are helping you do your process. Mm-hmm. So making sure we have these sustainable programs in place for these, because we're not going to have someone riddle hundreds of thousands of bottles of wine. That's just unsustainable. You're never going to get someone who's really passionate and, about the process.
And healthy enough to do
and healthy enough.
Let's be honest. These riddling racks, the new age riddling racks, they're not passionate at all.
No,
but they don't have emotion in there whatsoever to screw anything up.
Exactly.
So,
and they're cheaper.
Yeah.
And they're much higher quality
and more
riddling,
efficient and everything.
More efficient, and most importantly, consistent. Because the world of wine, there's so many different expressions of wine in the world. That's why we do it. Every wine, the reason we love wine is because every single wine is made to be unique. It's one of two commodities in the world that's grown to be different from the one next to it.
Yeah.
Other one being coffee. We all love coffee.
Two people at this table love coffee.
Three people. Oh.
He doesn't.
Oh, you don't. Two people at this table.
I make coffee every day for her.
Oh, okay.
I love the smell of coffee. Just don't drink it.
Yeah. So coffee and wine. Commodities in the world that are grown to be
I replace it with beer.
And now the riddling racks can be used as home decor.
Yeah, exactly.
Home decor. So Andrew,
we haven't
we haven't talked about this at all, and I still want to get as they evolve in your glass. You have the two glasses still. I would love to get your opinion on how they're evolving. But what is the grape in or grapes in this rosé sparkler?
So in the rosé, going back to being Washington specific, our ambition is to showcase the regions, the grapes, and their growers in Washington. So not taking that champagne ideals and doing it in Washington. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves. We want to make those sparkling wines that really represent Washington. This one really represents that. It is a blend of equal parts Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Merlot, and Pinot Gris.
20% each.
25% each.
Or did you say 4 or 5?
4.
Oh, well,
yep.
I was told there would be no math here. And Pinot Gris.
Yep. Pinot Gris.
Wow. Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yep.
Who knew?
Merlot.
Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, and Pinot Gris.
Wow. Yep. That's fantastic. And it's got such a lovely color.
Mm-hmm. Real nice and light. Very Provence-esque color with that onion skin, kind of peach skin hue. Mm-hmm. High acid. All those different grape varietals, they have their input to the wine. So, the Cabernet comes in with that nice fruit-forward, kind of crunchy red fruit on there.
The Merlot, a little weight to it.
Exactly. Yeah. The Merlot, it gives the entire mid-palate of the wine. The Syrah, it brings in that creaminess. And then the Pinot Gris, it brings in that backbone, the structure, and that waxy texture.
I was going to say maybe even mellow out those other three, too. Right. The Pinot Gris will come in. It's like, mellow out, boys.
Yep. And the Pinot Gris kind of tones back that color to make sure it has that nice onion skin hue to it.
It's
beautiful.
It's absolutely stunning. I need to show that one more time since you have still yours in the glass. See what happens when I'm not talking, I'm drinking. So.
Well, there's plenty of bottles on the table, so if you need to revisit, feel free.
I know there are, man. Okay, so how about those two still in the different glasses? I'm curious because now it's been in the coupe glass for probably 8 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that.
So I always kind of shoot myself in the foot in these situations because I'm a big swirler. In sparkling wine, it's very difficult to taste with the carbonation in it. So I always swirl all the bubbles out of it so I can taste the truest expression of it.
I get it.
Just,
we swirl our sparklers too.
Yeah. But with a coupe, you can't swirl.
No.
So unfortunately, that being said, there is definitely differences between the two glasses. I mean, I'm definitely still getting more of that fruit forward characteristic out of the coupe. And then I'm getting more of that savory kind of characteristic out of the sparkling wine glass. And, the coupe is still definitely a little bit less carbonated.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that went pretty quick. But anyway.
So these are both method champenois, traditional method. But I'm not tasting the yeast that I taste in some French wines that I sparkling that I don't really like. They're over yeasted. How do you get rid of that?
So the thing is,
so these are great.
as I mentioned, that yeast characteristic comes from aging in the bottle. And it can be a blessing and a curse considering our situation of starting in 2020. We're very limited with time. But one of those things that we realized is we don't need to stick to those French ideals because you have to do a minimum of like 3 years in bottle for champagne for non-vintage. And like that, you definitely have yeast character out of that. But like a majority of both of these wines are 8 months in bottle on the yeast. So they're very fresh, very clean, and they're more focused on that fruit forward. But another thing is, like I said, we're very proactive versus reactive.
Yeah.
So one of those things that we know is not everybody loves that brioche savory characteristic. And if you look at wines around the world, a lot of the American drinkers are drinking more fruit forward wines, Cabernet, the Chardonnay. Every wine is more on that fruit forward side, whereas more European old world wines have more of that funk savory characteristic.
Funk is a good word.
We see that and we're like, okay, I mean, we personally would like to do a little bit more aging on our wines, but we're perfectly suited with our community to release these younger, fresher, more fruit forward sparkling. So a majority of our wines are on this more fruit forward side, but we do have some of those higher end wines that age a little bit longer. But one of our goals is to produce many different sparkling wines.
Sure.
As you go to a restaurant, look at the red wine by the glass list. There's going to be 8 different options. The Cabernets, the Merlots, the Syrahs, the Pinot Noirs.
2 sparklers. If you're lucky.
You're lucky, you have 2 sparklers. The whites, you have like 6 or 7 that's there too. Yeah. But you generally either don't have a sparkling or there's one sparkling. But there's a genius in the 80s, changed the world of food science. Ultimately ended up creating Ragu, the pasta company, because he realized there's not one perfect pasta sauce for everybody. There's 32 different pasta sauces for 32 different palates. And
32 different Triscuits.
Yep, exactly. Everybody likes their different stuff. It's subjective. Everybody likes what they like. Yeah. So our goal is to produce these different sparkling wines to showcase there's more than just a sparkling wine, and it's not just champagne. There's multiple different styles and multiple different flavors. Yeah. And, we just love sparkling.
And that's so cool. When we come back, we're going to take one last break. When we come back, I would love to know how you ended up on sparkling. I would love to know a little bit about this area, which is the Walla Walla Incubator Program here in Prosser, essentially. And I also want to talk about one other thing that I just forgot about right this very second. So when we come back.
All right.
Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays. Shelley and Phil and Andrew from Tirriddis. Andrew Gerow, like Al Gerow, only Andrew Gerow. I'm pretty sure my Uncle Joe is no longer listening. But if you are, Joe, thank you for hanging in there with us because he was a wealth of information when it came up to these.
And this is the Tirriddis.
Coupe Glasses. This is the Tirriddis Rider family. Single vineyard sparkling Pinot Blanc. I will show you that just for kicks. And now I'm running out of real estate. Man, 8 wines, Shelley. Look at us go. What?
You haven't poured it.
I'll
sorry,
reach over and grab
my
that. So this wine that we're pouring real quick is a real fun wine for us. It's part of our single vineyard series, which are our truest expressions of Washington terroir from really unique or cool sites that we're particularly fascinated on. And this one is 100% Pinot Blanc from Ryder Family Vineyard, which is just north of Yakima in Selah, Washington. Really extreme, cool climate site. And we had a pretty serendipitous meeting with the Ryder family. And we just kind of fell in love. Yeah, exactly.
The best of the serendipitous ones.
And we just kind of fell in love with some of their wines and ended up tasting their Pinot Blanc. And we'd always wanted to do a Pinot Blanc for sparkling because it ripens really slow. It really maintains acid. So it seems perfect for sparkling. And we ended up finally, after a little bit of time, convincing them to sell us some grapes so we could make a single vineyard out of it. And
it's vintaged.
Yep, and it's vintage data.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, it's our most terroir driven. So our single vineyard series is our interpretation and translation of that vineyard site from vine to bottle. So really relinquishing our control and input into the wine to get the truest expression of the site possible. And Pinot Blanc is a very fresh varietal, and we wanted to produce this in a very fresh style. So when you try it, high acid, very bright, very vibrant, and it has a great like lime zest, marzipan, and Bartlett pear kind of characteristic to it.
That's quite the combination.
Yeah, and great waxy texture on it. It's fermented in 100% concrete egg to really preserve that minerality and freshness. And literally almost like a couple days after finished fermentation, put it into bottle, preserving all those characteristics. So it's very, very fresh. And
we should test this one.
Yeah, it's very fun and very, very limited wine.
Yum.
Very scarce. Yum. Yeah, hashtag yum.
This is so fun. This is absolutely so fun. Concrete egg. Those will last forever, almost.
Yep.
Yeah.
Total nightmare.
Really?
To be totally candid on the podcast, I would say there's not many things in this world that I hate, but I hate concrete eggs.
Oh, no.
But they do have an impact on wine that you can't really mimic. So that being said,
would you buy them once?
Yeah, you buy them once.
And why do you hate them?
I've spent too much time inside of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yep, and I've shaved off my knuckles a couple times hitting the concrete, and it's almost impossible to fully clean them. And we're all,
gross.
Like I said, proactive people. We're also kind of control freaks in the winery.
Well, you kind of almost have to be.
Yeah,
you have to be.
You kind of have to be.
Yeah.
And so that being said, you're kind of like a little bit uncomfortable with how it is, but it's relatively clean, so you just kind of have to trust it. And but yeah,
in Burgundy they have open tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Lord knows what gets in them.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
that's called terroir.
That's what they call terroir. Okay, but here we've got come on, did you really say that?
I did.
That's gross.
Going back to the
the Charles Shaw, $2 Chuck. Anyway, you are going to have an element of this. You can only be so clean, but this is still alcohol.
You can't really bleach anything because that will taste terrible.
You can't bleach anything.
Yeah, no.
But this is still alcohol, and alcohol is going to take care of
it. The thing about wine, it's a very stable product.
Yeah.
Right? You don't really have to be too concerned with wine. And,
it's not got a lot of bacteria.
It doesn't have a lot. It's a very harsh environment for a lot of things.
Sure.
And so that being said, still kind of concerned with it, but at the same time, you just have to relinquish a little bit of control. And quite frankly, that's what wine is. It's a combination of art, nature, and science. So, if you take one of those components away from it, you're going to lose a lot of synergy. So it's important to consider all those things when approaching wine. And that's what we do. Unfortunately, some of those make us a little uncomfortable. Unfortunately for us, not anybody else, it just raises my blood pressure a little bit. But, it's a great, makes a great wine.
That you started in 2020 and sort of left school at that time? Did you go back to school once you were allowed to, or did you study from home? Or
So it was
You
all
guys-
from home. Yep,
Wow.
it went to online school. So from in person to online. We ended up finishing and graduating school. All three of us, Matthew Dutney, Gabriel Crowell, and myself. The three of us are graduates of Washington State University's Viticulture and Enology program. So we studied the science of grape growing and the science of winemaking for college. And when the pandemic came around, it kind of curtailed our plans. And as I mentioned earlier, it kind of made us joke around, and we ended up starting
too much.
Starting this. So we do have degrees in viticulture and enology, and Washington State University is a great school. And not only is it a great school with a great wine program, but it's also in the middle of wine country. So it's
Palouse is just, it's farming.
And so we went to WSU Tri-Cities. So we went to a satellite campus. So the program is actually located in Tri-Cities.
Gotcha.
And the three of us actually moved from literally all the way around the world to go here for WSU. So there's some clout and pull that WSU has. Like I personally moved from Michigan, which is 2,000 miles away, and I'm the closest to Washington State.
I'm not
Tri-Cities.
a big fan of anything Michigan right now because they beat the Huskies. But
and where did your other two friends come from?
Yeah.
So Matthew Dutney came from Long Island, New York.
Wow.
And he's the second closest. The third, Gabriel Kroll, he moved here from Cyprus in the Mediterranean.
Oh my gosh.
and you three did not know each other until you
Right. It was everything about Tirriddis, from the bubbles to us, is the stars aligning. So the three of us, all serendipitously, no connection to the wine industry.
Yeah.
It was just some little seed that was planted in us that loved food or wine that got us interested, and ultimately ended up having us stumble upon the program and applying and committing. And when we got here, coincidentally had 3 apartments right next to each other, and ended up becoming friends and hanging out all throughout school. Ended up realizing that we all love sparkling wine, and
that's
played
fantastic.
video games together, when
They were
golfing.
in your bubble.
Yeah, they were a bubble, literally and figuratively.
And the thing that so before we went live on this, I think it was Gabriel, that you guys have made your name known very quickly. 2020, we just started 2024. We're talking 3 vintages that you've had. And you're making your name very quickly. And everybody says that those kids have got it going on. And it's like, well, everybody's kids to Shelley and I. But as we've had this conversation, I don't mince words. I am blown away by your knowledge. This is not anything that you're still, I know you're still learning, but you're not looking anything up. This is all boom, boom, boom. You have just nailed this stuff. And these are beautiful representations of Washington sparkling wine. And I don't just say that. This is fantastic stuff. In the Coeur d'Alene area, you can for sure get this at Lola Wine Lounge, but we will be making a push that more distributors are bringing this in. And so we can see some Tirriddis on the store shelves as well, because this is good stuff. Let's talk quickly. Well, I don't want to leave that yet, because you had a roommate that we're going to visit with in a couple, 3 weeks. And he's a funky roommate in a sense.
Yeah.
If only by name.
Definitely by name only. He's a clean freak.
Really?
In the best way. And
Jared Funk from Savaya.
I never talk bad about anybody, especially my best friends. But my best friends, I definitely do give a little bit of crap.
As you should.
As I should.
As you should.
And he's a very great person, and him and his family make incredible wine.
Yeah.
And
we're going to have them on in a couple, 3 weeks. I think we're going to have them on the first week of Washington Wine Month in March. Yeah. So
have you met Ethan by any chance?
Ethan
is
Lillis?
over at Sabaya.
Yes.
He comes from Coeur d'Alene.
Yes, absolutely. I've hung out with him a couple times, actually. Another really great soul.
Yeah.
Started in serendipitously ended up in wine and wine sales, and then ended up going into wine production at Sabaya.
Yep.
Really great
invited
person.
to do this.
Yes.
Look like we have a barrel fermented Blanc de Blanc R3.
Yep. And so as you mentioned, R3, this is a kind of a cool segue into a major component of our program. R3 is short for rendition number 3.
Okay.
So as I mentioned,
Highly
non-vintage, multi-vintage, and vintage wines, right?
Right.
Mhm.
With multi-vintage comes variation, right? And for us to keep track of that variation, we assign rendition numbers to it. So every time we blend a new multi-vintage wine, we associate a rendition number with it. So the higher the number, the younger and newer it is, whereas the older the number, the more complex and
Makes
aged
sense.
per se. So it's just a little technical component that we like to associate that helps you keep track as well as us keep track of our wines.
Who's the one who is responsible for the Excel sheets?
Excel sheets.
Yeah, for
We have
keeping
probably
track
the
of all
most
this.
complicated Excel sheets, and
You
that's
have it on Google Drive?
OneDrive.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yep.
Microsoft. Okay.
Yep. And so, as we kind of joked around earlier about business plan on the napkin, we actually have like 150-page business
my
plan
goodness.
document.
So how?
and, like,
So this is
multiple
really
Excels.
interesting. That's a very, very thick document.
Mhm.
Okay, 150 pages is it's really in depth.
Mhm.
One could argue too in depth, right?
Yeah, I think that's just kind of the way that we go into things, though.
But you have to pivot. I mean, you were thrown a curveball in 2020, and you're going to have opportunities to pivot all the time. How often do you revisit your business plan? This is business 101 now. This is good.
Just about every month.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
So you will revisit that as a group, tweak some things,
Mhm.
revise it, and off revision.
Yeah.
Off you go.
Rendition.
Rendition.
Yep. Pretty much.
Rendition
exactly.
and
I
revision.
mean,
There you go.
one of the best things is we do have this business plan, but we're not corporate. We're literally just young 20-year-old dudes who are super ambitious and just, we can pivot on a dime. We don't need to go through any judicial process except calling each
No,
other up
but-
and being like, hey,
Hey,
we're
let's
facing
not do
this. Let's figure this out. And then it's like, it might stir things up a little bit, but we're always down to hear each other out. And I think I'm going to be blunt in saying it, I'm the most critical out of the three of us. So I'd probably be the quickest to say no, that's not going to be happening. But, both of them, we all know each other so well. We know how to build each other up and, hey, hear me out. I know you're hesitant, but hear me out. And I think it's one of the strongest things that we have going for us, besides the fact that there's three of us and we can be in three places at once.
Yeah.
But
Right.
we
right.
can, but have this, friendship and ability that we're very agile and can pivot at any moment that we need to around sparkling wine.
And this is basically a startup. I mean, essentially, it's a startup.
It is a start.
You say you're not corporate, but are you incorporated?
We don't need to talk business.
I-
We're talking wine here.
Okay, so let's go back to
But
Tony
I
Shea
have a
and
question. There.
Zappos.
We haven't talked about the alcohol percentages on any of your.
That's a good thing to bring up. Our sparkling wines, our
12.5?
highest, yes, right around. Well, most of ours are between 11.5 to 12.5.
Wow.
This one in our glass is the highest alcohol wine that we produce
the one we just
at
poured.
13.6.
Gotcha. This is the revision 3.
This is the barrel fermented Blanc de Blanc. This is a fun wine.
Rendition 3.
This wine, I'm going to say it, but everything we do is with the utmost sincerity and purpose. That being said, this wine originally started as a joke and is now our highest rated, most popular wine that we
Oh,
produce.
This
So
one
why
started
was
as a
it a
joke.
joke?
Yeah, this wine started as a joke because, just read the name. Barrel fermented Blanc de Blanc, right?
Mhm.
Barrel sparkling wine. What's going on there?
Yeah.
So is it like
Sparkling
a
wine in a barrel.
So it's
New oak?
100% Chardonnay, 65% brand new French oak on the
Ooh.
base wine ferment. So
Okay.
literally the grapes coming from the
You're
vineyard,
tasting that
pressed.
in this?
Oh yeah, it's not shy.
No, it's fantastic. Does anybody do that?
No, well, so
This is
people
really good.
Did it? People did it. I believe Shandon also does it, but very very small. We get a lot of inspiration from Shandon. Their wine style, very crisp, very clean.
You
We
like
love
the caves,
Shandon.
don't you?
I've never been, but
Really?
I've just had some of their wine, and we very much admire
Yeah,
it.
Domaine
If they
Chandon,
hear this,
Good shout out.
reach out to us. We'd love to
They
talk.
used to have a
But-
great restaurant.
Yeah. The person who did the head chef of the Shandon restaurant owns a restaurant here in Prosser.
So you should tap that out.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
I mean, literally.
Wine O'Clock. Go to Wine O'Clock in Prosser.
Okay.
Um,
We have to write that.
But so this wine, as I mentioned, it started as a joke because the three of us, we don't have a wine background. We don't have fathers or grandfather or like grandparents.
There's a freshness to
us.
that.
Yeah, there's a freshness, and it really forces us to experiment. And we read that old champagne houses used to do barrel ferments on some of their premium cuvées. So Bollinger, Krug, they both got very famous for doing barrel ferments. And we read that and we were like, huh, shit. Like we should take note. But seriously, let's try it. But
the finish on this is remarkable. Yeah. It's still going on way back there.
Yeah,
it's really good.
And when we read barrel ferment, we were like, huh, let's try it. But instead of being real reserved, let's go all out because we can always tone it back. But we wanted to really express our personality and approach to winemaking as, we don't want to have that old guard approach where this is what we do, and if you don't like it, move on. Like, we're very fresh. We're trying to experiment.
How many different wines do you offer? You're going to touch somebody unless they're like, I just don't do sparkling wines.
Exactly.
Okay, we're not for you.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And so just testing those styles that really drive our wines and trying to do a barrel ferment and really just open the hell out of it. And trying to make the
barrels did you have to buy?
Too many.
How many is too many? One?
Oh, well, yeah, one is too many for sure. But
will you do it again?
Oh, yeah, we do it. Well, so when we first did it, we were like, all right, at least we're going to do it. And if people don't like it, we're going to check the box and we don't have to do it again. Yeah. But we released it and people were like, holy shit, this is awesome. I've never had anything like that. And after joking around, we took it a little bit more seriously and we're like, all right, how are we going to make this good? What people hate about oaky Chardonnay is the butter characteristic and the viscosity of it. So let's make just the purest juxtaposition of oak spice and fruit profile. Super bright, super fresh, oak spice, fruit. And that's what this wine is. So
how long is
9 months in barrel?
Okay.
Yep. And then pretty much straight to bottle. And yeah, just focusing on the oak characteristic, bringing in that nice like bay leaf, cedar, ginger characteristic with that Chardonnay lending a nice like canned peach lemon curd.
This, I'm going to say, I love this lineup, but this one speaks to me. It really does.
Did Hans Cornell do oak aging? Not Corbel, but Cornell. His daughter is now producing.
I don't know exactly. I would say people might not have it on their label, but I think a lot of sparkling producers are now doing it. But the cooperage that we bought our barrels from is like, you're the largest buyer of barrels for sparkling wine in the United States. So we are in the United States, we're tiny.
Yeah.
But like Chandon, we buy more barrels than Chandon. We buy more barrels than Grouette, more barrels than Mum. So it's like we don't even have like that large a production, but we're serious about making our barrel fermented Blanc.
No,
we buy quite a few barrels.
Really nice.
So loving this. We have 2 more to get through.
Yep, absolutely.
We're gonna do this quickly.
I know that's why I said it. Gosh.
So I would recommend not taking either of these next 2 in the wine or in the glass that the barrel fermented Blanc was in, because that wine is boisterous.
But this one I am going to revisit at some point. It's
absolutely
really good. This
and
is
then
your Blanc de Blanc.
Pass this over. Oop.
Thank you.
And starting.
So this is a rendition 2.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A demi-sec.
So these last 2 that we're trying, dessert for last, a little cherry on top. It's our demi-sec series, which demi-sec means semi-sweet. And we never really thought we were going to do semi-sweet wines, but people asked for it and we did it. So the way you get sweetness in sparkling wine is through dosage. So after the riddling and disgorging, when you disgorge, the bottle is open. And what you can do is add a dosage there. So you suck a little bit of wine out of the bottle, and then you add the dosage, which is sugar dissolved in wine, and it brings up the sweetness, and then you top it up and throw a cork in it.
Is there a formula for how big a dosage you add? Is
yes,
it just
it
the
is.
Disgorging part?
Nope. So it is very, very complex. Oh. So when you disgorge, you actively have to suck wine out of the bottle to make room. And then you add a very, very specific amount of dosage, which is a very, very specific concentration of sugar. And then once you add that dosage, you actually add some of that wine that you sucked out back into the bottle to get it to that final level, because you don't want any variation in sugar concentration. Like every single one of our demi-secs, our demi-sec Blanc and our demi-sec Rosé, which is that next bottle that I passed over to you.
Oh, that's this one. Oh, I'm sorry.
And that one is, both of them are 30 grams per liter of sugar, which, sounds like a lot, but at the same time, 30 grams per liter is not that much.
And then, so we talk about residual sugar, but you're talking in a different language.
Well, that's nothing.
Yeah. So how do those?
So think about 30 grams per liter as less than Coca-Cola.
Hope so.
Yep. So there's less sugar than Coke, and like Veuve Clicquot. Everybody thinks, when they think of sparkling, they think of champagne. Veuve Clicquot being one of the best, most accessible champagnes. Their demi-sec is right about 45 grams per liter.
Okay.
But it's really important for us that we achieve our house style. As you've noticed, very fruit forward, very high acid, crisp, vibrant. It's just because our favorite wines in the world reflect people who make them. And we feel like that really reflects us as a producer. And even our sweeter wines still reflects that style of very vibrant, fresh, not viscously sweet in any way. So we have to tone it down a little bit. So it's semi-sweet, where if you like sweet wine, it's not too dry, or if you like dry wine, it's not too sweet. It's just right in the middle. And, a tasting room, especially on a cold day like today, probably the worst place in the world that you can try this wine. Really, you got to be sitting outside on your back patio, baking in an Adirondack chair in the sunshine. And this bottle will go way quicker than you.
I have to respectfully disagree on one aspect of what you just said. The aspect of sitting in the sun enjoying this in an Adirondack chair baking sounds delicious, and 100% on board with that. It's okay to drink this in the cold. It's freaking 5 degrees outside as we're recording this.
Yeah.
Okay. This is fine. It's perfect. By the way, in the winter in our house, we have a walkout freezer, and we just stick the wines that we're going to have in the snow on the deck. And then we it's like, we see the lineup. What do you want? Bring it in. Okay.
Love that.
Yeah. And so actually we had a listener a couple years ago that said, man, you guys must be rich. You have a walk-in fridge that you keep your wine. It's called the garage.
And we live in a cold area in the winter.
It's pretty funny. You have a question.
So the grapes.
The grapes. So in the left glass is our demi-sec Blanc, which is 99% Chardonnay and 1% Pinot Gris. And then the one in the right glass is equal parts Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Merlot, and Chardonnay.
25%.
Yep, 25%.
So
yeah, I love that. That's the Chardonnay that's in the barrel for me?
Different Chardonnay.
Okay, because go ahead. Sorry.
The thing is, in the winery, we have 14 different sparkling wines. That's how many sparkling wines we make.
You are committed.
Yeah, we're committed, but we don't do 14 different ferments, right? We're doing about 40 different ferments, and all those are little spice jars in the cabinet that we can sprinkle and add in any one of our wines that we want. We have, some are destined for a single program, but we make these other ones that we know can juxtapose and build on those components to create those styles that we're really looking to achieve.
Very nice. So you're using a Chardonnay on this instead of a Pinot Gris. And then you're adding sugar. So why do you choose the Chardonnay? Is like to balance it? Maybe too much sugar if you use Pinot Gris, or is just because? So
we in our rosés, the fourth rendition of the rosé that you tried earlier, that one has Pinot Gris because we've gotten better at making Pinot Gris. Originally, it's a real tricky grape to make into sparkling. Like, have you ever had a sparkling Pinot Gris before?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, Pinot Gris is just a grape that grows great in Washington, and we really want to showcase it as a Washington sparkling varietal. Maybe the poster child, even, if I dare to say. But earlier, before we got really good at making the Pinot Gris, we had to use Chardonnay to provide that backbone in our rosé. So the Chardonnay lent that backbone structure and acidity that those red varietals lacked, that brought it into this holistic, full, complete sparkling wine. But we've gotten better with the Pinot Gris, so we'd prefer to incorporate that instead.
I love this. These are fantastic. We do want to wrap up, but I have two more questions to ask. And one is, how do you decide, first of all, you know your lane, you are committed to the Sparklers of Washington State, and you are grabbing the torch and leading the way, right? Mm-hmm. But there are three of you. Mm-hmm. What happens? Like, how are your palettes? I'm sure are similar, but they have to be still different. How do you work through that?
We're definitely still. We have a little bit of difference, but you have to remember, in college when we were developing our palettes, we would be drinking champagne and eating fried chicken together. So we drank the same bottles that define our palettes.
Okay,
our palettes are calibrated by the same bottles here. That being said, we do have preferences, but we all know what battles we want to fight and which ones we don't.
Good for
and
you.
also
So,
which cells.
Yep, and which cells.
You have to do.
Like, it's important. Tirriddis there's another reason why our names are not on the label, right? Mm-hmm. It's because it's not us, it's Washington Sparkling Wine. So we have this idea that's not necessarily what we prefer. Like you were saying earlier, you like this fruit forward. If we had more time, we would like to do maybe more savory, but that's not necessarily what people want. So we understand we're relinquishing a little bit of our expression because it's important that we're not only considering traditional method sparkling wine, Washington State, the grapes and their growers and their unique climate that we have here that we're very lucky to have, but also expressing us as the winemakers. So all three of those are very important characteristics that we need to consider. And our palate is 1/3 of 1/3, so those other things, Washington, then the grapes and the growers and the traditional method, that's way more important than our palate, our considerations. So just relinquishing our ego and making sure we're producing the best.
And that's the way it is
important.
with most businesses.
Yeah, you have to do that. Relinquish your ego for the better of the whole, right?
Because it's not about you, it's about your customer.
So we haven't asked this in a while, Shelley, but I feel this is really important.
It's the fried chicken and the champagne.
In a sense, I need to know what that champagne is that you guys would go with, but I need to know what your gateway wine is.
What was the first wine you ever had
that said,
made you
I'm
think,
kind of thinking this is really fun? Not on the show notes.
God.
You didn't have to prepare.
Yeah, I didn't have any preparation for this one. God, I think there's a couple wines. So I would say the most defining wines that I've ever had are not sparkling.
Interesting.
And those actively define our sparkling wines that we have. Well, because one of those wines that I've had that really defined my palate is they're great. I guess to plug the sparkling producers that really help define our style is Jan's in Tasmania, Chandon in California, and Gimene in Champagne. Great producers, very clean, very fruit-forward, fresh styles. Awesome producers that directly influence our sparkling, that are sparkling.
Right.
Then one wine that really defined my approach to texture in wine is I had a 1990 SGN Pinot Gris from Domaine Ostertag in Alsace, France.
Really?
And that is probably the craziest, best wine I've ever had in my life.
When did you have that?
A couple of years ago.
Okay, so it was a 97. You had maybe in 2017 or something.
No, well, I mean, I would have been 18 years old in 2017,
Yeah,
so I wasn't legal. So I didn't.
Yeah,
drink
you
wine
never
back
drank
then.
any
No.
alcohol when you were 18, did you?
No,
Lying
not at
sack
all.
of dog.
So, but I had that at about, it was 30 years old when I had it.
Wow.
And it was just the most texture-rich wine that I've ever had in my life.
No, great. 30 years old.
Yep. So, and it was SGN, which is Selection Grand Noble.
It was in 1997?
1990.
Oh, 1990. Well,
Yeah,
that makes
1990.
okay. I heard 97 just for my own. Okay.
That was before I was born. So,
But in and of itself is pretty cool.
yeah. So having one of those, it was so fresh, so vibrant still.
30 years old.
Yep, 30 years old. And it had the most incredible waxy texture. I'd take a sip and I wouldn't even have to take a sip for literally a half hour. I could feel the texture on the wine.
The best.
And now, since I've had that wine, I've spent way too much money trying to collect as many as possible from that producer.
Well, and people really put down Pinot Gris.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And
If we do, we kind of do. Because we
yeah.
haven't had super decent Pinot Gris.
Well, what
Yeah.
I said was even last week when we were really pitching crap on Pinot Gris is there are good Pinot Gris out there. We have had good Pinot Gris. They're just hard to find.
right. And unfortunately, it's one of those grapes that has a poor reputation.
Yeah.
It's a one-dimensional crisp porch pounder that your grandma drinks.
Yeah,
That's what Pinot Gris is, unfortunately. But we have had the fortunate luck of trying Pinot Gris coming from Alsace and Eastern Europe that have incredible complexity and depth and layers, and it grows great in our state. So we want to draw inspiration from that and then
that's
produce it in a
fantastic.
sparkling.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I'm going to start wrapping this up, Shelley, because this has been fantastic. Man, back-to-back weeks of unbelievable education. Yeah. Some wines we enjoyed this week. Thank God it's another short list. Lindenhurst Spotswood Cabernet Sauvignon, High Note Malbec, and Elsom Cellar Syrah. Thank you, Jody. Doing great. Some things coming up next week. International Ferment Day on the second. On the first, but on the second, happy birthday to South African wine. We're going to keep saying that. Down at Bottle Joy, they got a whole lot of South African wine that's not only fantastic, it's great price points.
We love Bottle Joy, by the way.
How can you not?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they, again, Kurt and Joy had a lot of great things to say about you too. But I trust Joy, not so much Kurt, but Kurt, that's for you. On the 5th, Rosé Day in Australia and New Zealand. On the 16th, International Syrah Day. On the 18th, Global Drink Wine Day, as we say over and over, it's every day. We will have Jared Funk with Savaya, Andrew's former roommate, and Sarah Fowler with Peju, as well as Open That Bottle Night that's coming up in our 200th episode. We've been asking this. Any idea of what we did Cristal for our 100th episode? Any little suggestion you want to throw out for our
Tirriddis Rosé.
Tirriddis Rosé.
Of course.
Well, first of all, no, that barrel ferment I would like to revisit. That would be a great one. But what would you suggest for our?
I mean, sparkling wine. If you're going for champagne, Pierre Giminet Special Club, their Grand Terroir de Chardonnay, incredible wine. If you're looking for something out of the box from a New World region, Jan's. Again, shameless plug for our Jan's, Tasmania. Tasmanian wine is incredible. They have a vintage brut and a vintage rosé that's just blow your mind.
We might need to look at that because I don't think we've ever had a Tasmanian wine.
Yep. Jan's.
There's so many regions in the world that are making great wine. Uruguay, South Africa. I mean, we get pigeonholed. Wrap it up. We get pigeonholed. We, as Shelley said, we try to educate on this podcast. We really urge our listeners to try something new. By the way, barrel fermented sparkler. That you're not the originator of this concept, but that's kind of fallen off the side, and you're grabbing that and going with it. And this is fantastic.
Thank you.
The price points of these we will put in the show notes.
Anywhere between $26 and $41 for the most expensive.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Love that. And good job for that as well. Thank you to our sponsors today, Revora, and of course, Coeur d'Alene Fresh with a little bit of knowledge. We should change that. With a lot of knowledge, wine becomes a lot less overwhelming. Back-to-back episodes of just unbelievable education. Thank you so much, Andrew. This has been fantastic. When you're anywhere in the Tri-Cities, come and visit Tirriddis, and we'll see you next week with, I don't even know who we have next week because that's changed a little bit, but we'll see you next week. And here we go.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for spending part of your day to wind down with Shelley and Phil. Remember, you can listen to any episode of the Wine Time Fridays podcast by visiting winetimefridays.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us on our Wine Time Fridays Facebook page, Instagram, or on Twitter, which is @VintageTweets, for daily conversation. Until next week, here's our toast to you. To health, wealth, abundance, gratitude, peace on earth, and of course, romance.